Hello. First and foremost, Happy New Year to everyone who is watching us today. It's a pleasure to be here and to be announcing this first episode of a series about Gabriel Delanne. And we will be talking about important people, the pioneers of Spiritism. We've had the opportunity to talk about Leon Denis, who was one of them, together with Kardec, actually laying down the foundations of Spiritism. And today we start then a new series about another very important person with a wonderful contribution. That was Gabriel Delanne. So we'll be having our talks every first Sunday of the month, 6 p.m. UK time. So we will have it all the way throughout the year until December, when we have our final one, a roundup of all the presentations. So we'll get to know better the works of Gabriel Delanne. It's very important because some spiritists, they've heard about Gabriel Delanne, Leon Denis, and so many others, but they don't know the depth of their work. And this is a very good opportunity for us to do that. So we are doing this work basically organized by the Spiritist Centre for Peace, London, UK, with the support of the British Union of Spiritist Societies and Kardec Radio. So we are very thankful to Kardec Radio for allowing us to use the studio so we can have this talk today. Well, today we start this series with a very dear friend, Charles. For those who don't know Charles, I will just quickly introduce him. Charles is French, Charles Kempf. He's French. He's a retired engineer. His first contact with the Spiritism was in 1886. And he's working in French and international Spiritist movement since 92. So currently leading the, forgive my French, Centre d'études spirites Léon Denis in Mulhouse, France, since 97, and was a member of the organization committee of the 4th International World Spiritist Congress in Paris, 2004. He was a member of the executive committee of the International Spiritist Council between 2004 and 2016. A member of the executive committee of the French Spiritist Council, that was between 2007 and 2014. Member of the French-speaking Spiritist movement, General Secretary of the International Spiritist Council between 2012 and 2016, and responsible for the International Spiritist Council coordination in Europe. That was between 2007 and 2018. A member of the writing committee of the Revue Spirit in French, member of the working group of the Spiritist Encyclopedia, member of the French Spiritist Federation, researcher on the history of Spiritism and Allan Kardec. So there's no one better that I know who could introduce Gabriel Delanne to us. So Charles, it's a great pleasure to have you here. I hand it over to you.
Hello, Munir. Good evening or good afternoon for you. Sorry. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who are following us. I'm very happy to be here again with you for introducing this series of Gabriel Delanne, which is one of the pioneers of the Spiritist movements. First of all, also, I would like to address my best wishes to all of you, hoping that today being the day of International Day of Peace, that we can really work hard and harder to cultivate the peace in ourselves, and also to make that all these conflicts, which are unfortunately still harassing our Earth, our planet, will stop. Because otherwise we will not enter in this war at aimed world of regeneration. But okay, Gabriel Delanne was really one of the pioneers of the Spiritist movement together with Léon Denis. So I think, Munir, you can share the slides if you don't mind. Here we are. So introducing Gabriel Delanne and his work for this series that will happen every first Sunday of the month all around the year 2023. So as I told, Gabriel Delanne is known by name, but not so much known by his works, at least less than Léon Denis. Léon Denis is, I would say, a little bit more popular, more disseminated internationally. Gabriel Delanne is less known internationally, maybe because of the characteristic of his action, which was more centered on the scientific aspect of Spiritism, scientific aspect, but not only. He was really a true Spiritist and also disseminating all the moral consequences arising from the Spiritist phenomenon, the existence of the soul and its survival after the death, as we will see in some quotes from him. So Gabriel Delanne, his full name is François-Marie Gabriel Delanne. He is born 23rd of March, 1857 in Paris. His address at that time was 21 Cairo Street in Paris. And interesting is, you see, 23rd of March is exactly 4 weeks before the first issue of the Spirits book by Allan Kardec. So he is really part of this generation. So his father was called Alexandre Delanne. His true name, this is something I will complete for the next revised slide. His true name was not Alexandre. Alexandre was the given name. He had some other name on his birth certificate that we found out with Carlos Set. On our researchers about the mediums who participated to the codification. So Alexandre was a sales representative, and the mother of Gabriel was Alexandrine Didelot, and she and Alexandre had a modest shop of hygiene articles, which they were operating in Paris. Alexandre and Alexandrine adhered to Spiritism around 1861. We don't know the exact date. Alexandre is telling the full story, or the story of this discovery, where he's telling that it was after reading the Spirits book and the Mediums book. So since the Mediums book was published in March 1861, it could only be 1861, and he made Allan Kardec in Passage Sainte-Anne in Paris. So here again, the first address of Allan Kardec was Rue des Martyrs, and only in 1860, or end of 1860, he moved to this new place, Passage Sainte-Anne in Paris. So they both adhered to Spiritism. Alexandrine, on top of this, revealed to be an excellent medium in automatic writing. And Alexandre and Alexandrine founded a Spiritist group, Rue Saint-Denis initially, which was Maison des Bains Saint-Sauveur, known at that time. And this group was really very active during several years, several decades even, as we will see later. And I told you the full history of the beginnings of the Spiritist movement in France is described by Alexandre Delanne in a long series of articles he wrote entitled Voyage au pays des souvenirs, Journey to the land of memories, that he published in the magazine Le Spiritisme between September 1888 and February 1895. But I discovered today as well that he continued publishing more articles in the La Revue Scientifique et Morale du Spiritisme, starting 1896. So it's a very interesting source of information about the history and the first steps of the Spiritism in France, but not only, also in Europe, because Alexandre was a commercial representative and he had the opportunity to travel a lot, also in Spain or in Italy or some other countries close to France. So this was the environment in which Gabriel Delanne was born. His parents were Spiritists, brought him up following the moral teachings of Spiritism. And since he was a young guy, his childhood, he was familiarized with the Spiritist vocabulary, and he attended many and very interesting seances at an early age. So as a small child, he was already participating to the meetings of the Spiritist group of his fathers. Okay. And in 1925, at the occasion of the International Spiritist Congress in Paris, Gabriel Delanne wrote the following: having had the good fortune to be born into a family where Spiritism had been studied since 1858, you see here again a discrepancy between 1858 and 1861 I mentioned before. It's probably somewhere between these two dates. So during all my youth, I attended very many seances where one obtained communication by the table and by writing. And this for 30 years in an absolutely disinterested way. So you see, this group of Gabriel Delanne was working more than 30 years. And it was really the basis where he made the first observations, first as a child and then as a researcher. So another episode about his youth, Mrs. Dussel, who is president of the Foyer Spirit de Béziers. It is in south of France, between Montpellier and Narbonne. And other colleagues of the committee of the Union Spirit Française, French Spiritist Union, told us about an interesting memory, says Henri Regnault, the biographer. Alexandre Delanne, during his business trips, stayed at the Hôtel des Postes, and when he went to Béziers, he liked to tell that his 7-year-old boy, so 7 years, this was then 1864, had once been questioned about his parents' profession. With charming naivety, Gabriel had answered, "Dad, he is a spiritist, and Mom too. She is even a very good medium. I hope to be able one day, like her, to honor my faith." And this is, in fact, what he did later on. And Alexandre Delanne, he met Kardec 1861, and then they remained very, very close friends. You know, there was a big friendship between Kardec and Delanne, and even at the weekend, during the weekends, Kardec retired to the campaign, as he said. It's Villa Ségur. At that time, it was full of garden. It was not urbanized like it is today. And at that moment, he invited the closest friends from him, including the Delanne family. So Alexandre, Alexandrine, and the young Gabriel visited him a lot of times. And during his visits, Gabriel took Kardec took great pleasure in bringing toys to little Gabriel that used to jump familiarly on his knees. So Delanne, of course, knew Kardec, but he was child, because when Kardec died in 1869, he was only 12 years old. So, sorry. Gabriel studied first at the College of Cluny in Saône-et-Loire, then with his brother Ernest at the College of Gray, Haute-Saône, which is close to where I'm living, by the way. And it's also very close to the place where Alexandre Delanne was born, and all the family Delanne have the roots in this region of Haute-Saône, Gray. And also he had some people, the aunts lived in Gray, the sister-in-law of Alexandre Delanne, and that's why he was in that college, which was probably more open and less expensive than the colleges in Paris at that time. And after brilliant scientific studies, Gabriel Delanne was even admitted at the École Centrale des Arts et Manufactures. So this is one of the most prestigious engineering schools in France, where he entered on November 3rd, 1876. But unfortunately, he resigned and left the school on January 26, 1877, so only after a couple of months. And this decision was probably motivated, according to Henri Regnault, by the material situation of his parents, who had made very heavy sacrifices to themselves in order to give their son a solid education. So he had an scientific and engineering studies, but he could not complete this École Centrale des Arts et Manufactures. Okay, but his background clearly was scientific. And so he's an engineer like I am. So this is why I have this close affinity with him, and I like a lot his books and the way he's analyzing the things. You know, it's not the theoretical scientist. It's more the pragmatic approach, which is characteristic of engineers. And as an engineer, he joined the Pop Compressed Air and Electric Company, which was in Paris, and he remained working there until 1892. 1892, this is when he stopped and dedicated all his time. He was full-time dedicated to the Spiritist works. Also, he had some health problems, difficulties, as we will see further on, which also motivated that he stopped working. So a spontaneous communication was received by Gabriel Delanne when he decided to devote himself entirely to spiritualist propaganda. And this communication said, "Don't be afraid. Have confidence. From the material point of view, you will never be rich, but you will lack nothing." So interestingly, this is was the situation of Delanne, but it was also the situation of Léon Denis. It was also the situation of Allan Kardec. A lot of spiritists lived this same situation, and I think it's the healthiest and the safest situation for not having, temptations of losing time outside the important issues, and also to miss part of the mission that we accepted before our incarnation in this life. And this was then the situation of Gabriel Delanne. And this was true throughout the life of this apostle of scientific spiritism. So in 1882, 24th of December, has been founded the Union Spirit Française, French Spiritist Union. The first meetings happened with Amélie Boudet because she was still alive. She only died in January 1883. And this founding of the Union Spirit Française was motivated because of, the too commercial approach and the deviations that happened in the Society for the Continuation of the Allan Kardec works, which was led by Pierre Gaëtan Lemarie. So he started deviating, entering in theosophy, and being influenced also by Guérin, Jean-Baptiste Roustin, that we will see a little bit later also. And the people who were really, dedicated and to Allan Kardec, who wanted to follow his track, decided then to found a new entity, which is 100% following Kardec. And they founded also a new newspaper review or magazine, which was called Le Spiritisme. You know that Revue Spirit, that was founded by Allan Kardec in 1858, was led still at that time by Pierre Gaëtan Lemarie, and as it can be seen on the issues of that period, as I told already, deviated a little bit from Spiritism, also saying that Kardec is already has been, and the Spiritist has now to enter into more modern way and so on. And that was one of the reasons why at that time there were two magazines. So it's important if you want to have an idea of the Spiritism in France, not only to read the Revue Spirit, which is only one side of the thing, but also to read Le Spiritisme, which was the other side, the second trend of the Spiritist movement in France. So the first issue was in March 1883. It gave us a lot of headache, but finally we managed to have almost all collection of these numbers, from the first number until the last one, and we are missing only one monthly number, and it was already in 1894 when Gabriel Delanne was not anymore the director of this magazine. And all this is for free download on Spiritist Encyclopedia. You can see the website here, Spiritisme in French, .net. And there you can see in the magazine, you will find Le Spiritisme, this almost full collection. Okay. For this also, he got the financial help of Madame d'Espérance. And he's telling, interestingly, how this happened. He received a letter from a person asking him to visit her, and the letter was not very well written in good language. And so he was a little bit doubtful, but at the end was somehow like pushed by the mentors. He ended up visiting this lady. It was in a very poor house in a poor region of Paris. And his surprise was to discover this lady asking him to publish a newspaper. And then when he answered her, yes, this is our objective, but it needs a little bit of money to get that. And spontaneously, this poor lady who living in a poor place, Elisabeth d'Espérance, she was British, by the way, took 5,000 French francs at that time, saying, okay, this is just as a down payment for you to start this work. And this is how this magazine, The Spiritism, started in March 1883. Okay, and Madame d'Espérance, by the way, continued helping Gabriel Delanne for the other newspaper he founded later on in 1896, as we will see in a few moments. And Gabriel Delanne was editor-in-chief of this magazine until September 1893. And there the magazine had to be, this magazine was also, answering with very strong arguments. Gabriel Delanne participated actively to it against the theory advanced by Jean-Baptiste Roustin, which was who died a couple of years before, and whose theory was promoted by Jean Guérin. It was a rich person living in the Bordeaux region. So he managed already to influence, between brackets, Lemarie, being the main shareholder of the Society for the Continuation of Work of Allan Kardec, continuing work of Allan Kardec and promoting Roustin, for which Kardec took a very clear position that he did not share the ideas. So this is how the things are happening sometimes, unfortunately. And really the arguments advanced by Gabriel Delanne, for instance, with regards to the ethereal body of Jesus, which as per this theory was not truly incarnated like you and me with a physical body, but who was a kind of continuous materialization during the 33 years of his life. And Gabriel Delanne really made a an analysis and with strong arguments showing that this is absolutely impossible, on top of the arguments which were, of course, already advanced by Allan Kardec. And this is thanks to Gabriel Delanne, amongst others, Bert Propo and some others as well, the Mr. and Miss Rosen Dufour and some others, that in France, the story of Jean-Baptiste Roustin stopped, and today nobody knows him, who he is, and the books have never ever been published, never, not even a second edition. Okay. The same did not happen in Brazil, where some debates are still ongoing today. But okay, that's life. So this is thanks to Gabriel Delanne that this debate was closed in France very from the beginning. So let's listen to Gabriel Delanne, his speech, 23rd of January 1883. So you see, the Union Spirit Française was already founded by Le Spirit, but the Spiritism came only to 1.5 months later. In Père Lachaise Cemetery, where Gabriel is in the same dolmen grave as Allan Kardec. He made the following speech, so I will read it. Mrs. Allan Kardec was truly the strong woman according to the gospel. Having become the companion of the great popularizer of spiritualism, she adopted his ideas. She employed all her energies in the study of the new principles. She overcame the prejudices of her century and her education, and rose by her will to the height of the spirit of our master, with Allan Kardec. She later provided, by the deep attachment she kept for our way of seeing, that Spiritism had penetrated deeply into her heart. Yes, these great and sublime truths, which our philosophy professes, gave her the courage to boldly second the propagator of the new faith and to sustain him in the often so painful struggles of the apostolate. So you see the homage that given by Gabriel Delanne to Amélie Boudet was really very strong. And again, I mean, 57, 83, you see, he was only 26 years old. He's continuing like this. The companion of a superior man feels that particular duties are incumbent on her. Not only does she have, like any devoted wife, the task of surrounding him with love and thoughtfulness, but she also has the holy mission of strengthening his soul in the painful hours of trial. She must soothe the cruel wounds that hate and sarcasm cause in the hearts of the champions of progress. She must find those good words which are sovereign balms for the soul. She must finally, by her energy, give strength to the tired athlete. Well, Mrs. Allan Kardec was that woman. She did not fall into the lofty mission entrusted to her. During her husband's travels through France, she surrounded him with her solicitude and insight, often baffling by the soundness of her judgment those who wished to speculate on the master's well-known goodness. Allan Kardec was inspired by her so just intelligence for the making of his works. He never published one without consulting her, and often he took advantage of the advice furnished by the rectitude of his companion's judgment. It is therefore a double loss that we are making at the moment, that of a woman of heart devoted to our ideas, and that of a collaborator of the man of genius whom we regret. So you see, 26 years and making also already such a speech is really showing how strongly he was attached to Allan Kardec and his wife, that he knew since very young, and also showing what was the mission of Amélie. And it's only now, since a couple of years, that we have access to the exchanges of correspondences between Allan Kardec and Amélie Boudet, in particularly when he was traveling, that we can see that this homage is not at all exaggerated and that it represents the truth. So very nice speech of Gabriel Delanne, so young, when at the death of Amélie Boudet. So in April 1885, so a couple of years later, Gabriel Delanne published his first book, is Le Spiritisme devant la science, Spiritism in front of science. And interestingly, it's the same year that Léon Denis published Le Pourquoi de la Vie, The Purpose of Life, which has recently been translated into English and published by Bus. And so both Gabriel Delanne and Léon Denis started publishing their first Spiritist book the same year. So in this book, there are the first part, he is really making the first fundamental question, do we have a soul? And this is really following again the Kardec advice, saying that before to make somebody a spiritist, you first have to make him spiritualist. It means convince him that we have a soul, because if one is not convinced that he has a soul, you do not need to go further, saying where the soul comes from, where it goes to, that the soul can communicate through mediumship and so on. So it's really the start. The first step is to convince to have a soul. So you see, very young, Gabriel Delanne, not even 30 years, was already structuring his book, following exactly this proper methodology to convince the persons. He was also, then in the first part, he talks also about the positive materialism. So making, analyzing where the materialist idea comes in the mainstream science, came at that time, and is still today, mainstream science is still dominantly materialist, seeing that the conscience is a produce of brain, and that nothing else exists out of the matter. And this is typically the materialist position, while the spiritualist position is the opposite one, saying that we have a soul that is independent of the matter and that survives even the death, which is only the separation with the material body. Second part, so he's also summarizing the magnetism. Anton Mesmer, it was already 1 century at that time. Somnambulism, hypnotism, which were widely studied by scientists at that time. In the third part of the book, he's showing the evidences of the soul's immortality by experiences, mainly the mediumistic experiences. He's also reviewing the objections and answering to them one by one, the different hypotheses trying to explain the same phenomenon. In the fourth part, he is talking about the perispirit, the spiritual body, showing also the evidences of the existence and the properties of this perispirit. And in the fifth part, he is talking about mediumship, entering a little bit more in detail. So you see, this book, Le Spiritisme devant la science, is a kind of like the equivalent from Léon Denis is After Death. Is really talking about all the subject in a summarized manner, in order to introduce, to put it in the hands of a person who knows very little or knows even nothing about spiritism or spiritualism. So with the difference that Gabriel Delanne, the Spiritisme devant la science, is more scientifically oriented, but not only, again. And Après la mort, After Death of Léon Denis, is more philosophically oriented, but also not only. Léon Denis is also treating the scientific aspects and moral aspects, and Gabriel Delanne, of course, as well. And in 1923, this book had already 9,000 issues, 9,000 prints. 1885, so the same year, he became vice president of the French Spiritist Union, which was founded in December 1882, as we have seen. And from 1885 and during several years, he was had the opportunity also to travel, maybe not so much as Léon Denis, but yet he gave several lectures, not only in France, but also Belgium, Argelia, Switzerland, and other countries. And he was really very appreciated, like Léon Denis was, really. Léon Denis and Gabriel Delanne lectures and conferences had a lot of success. But Gabriel Delanne was unfortunately suffering from two things. First is a deficient vision because he had an abscess in the left eye when he was very young. So this affected his vision from that eye. And he had also ataxia. And ataxia, so I wrote here underneath the definition I found in Wikipedia. So it's a neurological problem where there is difficulties for coordinating the muscles. So this shows that he's how to say, he was walking not always in the, how to say, he had difficulty even to walk and to coordinate the movements. And so this, like Léon Denis, also had problem of vision. Like Allan Kardec also had health problems. We can see that all these pioneers did not have a so easy life. Nevertheless, they lived long enough in order to complete their mission. So no facility, no excessive comfort, but how to say, the necessary support in order to fulfill the mission. And around 1992, Delanne family suffered a financial catastrophe. So they lost a lot of money. We don't exactly why. So this is something to be investigated a little bit better. And in the magazine Le Spiritisme, that was running already 9 years, had to be sold to Arthur d'Anglemont in 1893. So this is when Gabriel Delanne stopped being the chief redactor, chief editor, and it was handed over to another person on behalf of Arthur d'Anglemont, which was the owner. You see again the same situation. Allan Kardec also had some financial difficulties. Not Allan Kardec, I would say Rivail, when he was when he had this Rivail Institute in Paris, Rue de Sèvres. That also there was also some money problem because of his aunt in 1840. How the histories are similar one to the other. And the year after died his mother, Alexandrine Delanne. It was the year after this. So you can see a succession of difficulties in the family. Let's listen now a little bit to Gabriel Delanne and to see how he homenageated Allan Kardec. We believe Allan Kardec is in the truth, and we will stand for his principles. Solidly supported by science, we will walk boldly along the path opened to us by its genius, eyes fixed on the consolations that our beloved doctrine, or body of knowledge, brings with it. We will walk towards the grandiose and limitless horizons that it reveals to us. We will walk towards the goal, supporting by the strength given by good law, truth, and science, and we will thus try to establish the truth of the works of the Master. So this is what he said in a speech that he gave 23rd of January 1887 in the city of Lyon, where Allan Kardec was born. Okay, so clearly Gabriel Delanne recognized the genius work of Allan Kardec, yet you see with the objective of gathering all the scientific evidences in favor of to give evidence to this theory, to this body of knowledge that Allan Kardec dedicated to us. 1893, it was his second book, so Le Phénomène Spirit, the Spiritist Phenomenon. Also 4 parts. First part he was seeing as in the antiquity. So you see, we always tell that mediumship is happening since the world is existing, since Methuselah or even before. And this book is a very interesting collection of historical facts about mediumship. So very interesting. Modern times, also how this developed most recently and also in the 19th century. The second part, he's developing the psychical force, the intelligence, the mediumship, and the transcendental spiritism. The third part, he is giving advices for mediums and experimenters, very good advices. And in the fourth part, he is summarizing the Spiritist doctrine or Spiritist body of knowledge. So this is the content of this second book, which in 1909 was already at the 6th edition. Okay. Here you can see 2 pictures of Gabriel Delanne, more or less at that time, when he was quite young. Voilà. And you saw a little bit after when he had to stop le spiritisme. Of course, Elisabeth d'Espérance was still here and asking him, please restart and something else and so on. And in July 1896, he is publishing the first number one of this first issue of the Revue Scientifique et Morale du Spiritisme. So you see, scientific and moral, Spiritism Scientific and Moral magazine. So you see, scientific and moral. So he was not of that trend saying, no, this moral stuff, that is too early and so on. So he did never lose this focus of the most important part of Spiritism, but was also developing the scientific approach in order to sustain all these moral consequences. So this magazine he published, you can see, during 30 years, from 1896 until his death in 1926. And there we have 100% all the prints we have found, even around the interruption which happened during World War One. So also everything is from free download in Spiritist Encyclopedia. You can find the website here, spiritism.net. And I was counting the number of pages. It's more than 18,000 pages. So imagine it's when you have them aside you, it's something like 2 meters high or 2 meters long. So many books and information and pages, and it's really a huge collection with discussions of hundreds and hundreds of facts that Gabriel Delanne gathered worldwide from the best sources. So not only France, but also UK, the SPR, from Italy, from Spain, from Latin America, wherever. He's really reporting all what happened in not only Spiritist, but also magnetics and mesmerism, hypnotism, all these sciences, all the phenomena and the studies that happened. And this, of course, on top of his own experience and observations. So I don't know if some of you knows this, even when I talk to Brazilian spiritists, even good researchers that have a good knowledge of Gabriel Delanne, very few people know this magazine. And we have it already since several years, of course, in France, available. And it's really, you can trust me, a huge source, encyclopedic source of all what happened during all that period. So don't hesitate to go there. It's everything for free. Should you have any doubt, please come to me. I will be happy to help you in your researches. Okay. March 1897, it was the third book he wrote, L'évolution animique, so animic evolution or soul evolution, where you have the following chapters. What is life? Very interesting chapter. He's also discussing the souls of the animals, and how did our spirit acquire the functional properties for mankind, a little bit like evolution in two worlds from André Louis Xavier. So that is really, he was a pioneer in this type of studies and reasoning and observations, Gabriel Delanne. The memories also of multiple personalities, that's how things still happening today, and is an enigma for psychiatry. The functions of the soul seen from incarnation, heredity, and the madness, and also last chapter talking about the universe. So it's a very, very excellent book, very detailed, but it will be presented separately by one of the other speech that will happen in the coming first Sundays of the month. So here you can see I had already the third edition of 1897, so 3 editions, so 3,000 issues sold the years of publication. And here some quote out of it. Today, we must get rid of the passions and instincts which are the remnants of our passage through the lower realms. The struggle is long and difficult because we have to modify the first perispiritual movements which were incarnated in us and which alone constituted our mental life during those distant times and 1,000 times over centuries when we were accomplishing our evolution. But the will is all powerful over matter. Progress opens before us its ever brighter prospects, and this same force which has made us into the state of intelligence beings will know how to open the way to better worlds where concord, fraternity, and love reign. You can see this last sentence, concord, fraternity, and love. So Gabriel Delanne was also strongly promoting peace. And since today is the International Day of Peace, showing that Gabriel Delanne was also very, very concerned about promoting the peace on our planet. June 1898, so it was 50 years after the Hydesville phenomenon, there was an International Spiritualist Congress in London. And Gabriel traveled to London and participated to it. So I did unfortunately not yet find, and since I'm here talking to our British or English-speaking colleagues, if some of you has a knowledge or an information about if there is a summary of this Congress in London and where we could find it, I would be heavily interested because so far I failed to locate it. And the information we have are the information that were published in other spiritist magazines like the Revue Spirit and also Revue Scientifique et Morale du Spiritisme. So we have some speeches. The speech of Gabriel Delanne, for instance, he was talking about reincarnation. The speech of Le Colonel de Rocha, who was also in London. The speech of Pierre Gaëtan Lemarie, who didn't participate but also sent a document to that Congress. But of course, a lot of, we have also the program, but unfortunately, we don't have the compilation of all the speeches that happened during this Congress. So here I would welcome if some of you have some information about an eventual print of the summary of this Congress, I would be interested. So Delanne presented a study on successive lives, and you know that this was one of the discussion points between the English, British, and American spiritualists and the French spiritists. By the way, the word spiritist is translated into English in spiritualist, even if, okay, spiritism is existing in UK in English, but apparently with a slightly different meaning. So this is how this took several decades. But one of the problems they had, a difference of opinion, was the French spiritists believed in reincarnation, and the English or American, some English and American spiritualists did not believe in reincarnation. And so that's why Gabriel Delanne took over to talk about this subject during this congress, which happened in London. Okay. And in January 1899, the year after, with Dr. Moutin, he founded the French Spiritist Society for the Study of Psychical Phenomenon. There were already several societies for study of psychical phenomenon. There was a SPR in London, of course, an SPR also in Australia and in US. In France, there were several of them. But one more was founded by Gabriel Delanne and Dr. Moutin, following stronger the spiritualist paradigm. Okay, so the spiritualist approach. So Delanne became its president, and it became the entity linking most of the French Spiritist societies, like uniting a center of communication of the different Spiritist and the psychic research groups around France. So this is what explaining how Delanne was a little bit like Kardec was at the beginning, the center of convergence of a lot of information about phenomena and so on. So the same happened with Gabriel Delanne at the very end of the 19th century in this society. And this society was replaced later on in 1919 by a new Union Spirit Française, because the Union Spirit Française, which was founded in 1882, had only a short life of about 10 years. And it has been founded again in the 20th century in 1919. Next book of Gabriel Delanne was in June 1899, L'âme est immortelle, so the soul is immortal. Again, in the content, we can find the first part, the observation history, magnetism, existence of perispirit, out-of-body experiences, spiritual body after after the death. The second part, the experiences, experimental studies of human soul exteriorization. There was a lot of experiments done by Hector Durville and even later on by Charles Lancelin and a lot of others also in UK. The experiences of Colonel de Rocha, l'extériorisation de la personnalité, de la sensibilité, and Dr. Lewis. And Gabriel Delanne is then summarizing all the evidences coming from those researchers, and also the photographs and the castings. There was that time of first casting down, in paraffin cast of materialized spirits. The first evidences came already at the end of the 19th century. And in the third part, Gabriel Delanne took again this subject of the spiritism and the science, showing very strongly that the spiritists at that moment were still following the scientific methods, positivist methods, but for investigating spiritualist and abnormal phenomenon, but with following this spiritualist paradigm. And the fourth part was an essay on fluidic creation by will, which is today called, Munir, can you help me? Ideoplasty. Okay. So there was already, so it is known since Kardec, the word did not exist at that time yet, but still Gabriel Delanne made an essay about this in the fourth part of this book. And in 1923, we had the seventh edition of this book. 1900, after the 1898 Congress in London, there was a Congress in Paris, International Spiritist and Spiritualist Congress. You see, Congress Spirit et Spiritualist. Because of this confusion, they just put the two words, and both were united together in the same Congress. And Gabriel Delanne had a very strong participation in the organization committee, and he was also participating to the Congress. Unfortunately, not as much as he would like to, because he had already these health problems. But he was a general secretary of the Spiritist section of this Congress. And here on the right side, you can see the summary book, which is something like 500 pages. This one we found, and it's also for free download in the Spiritist Encyclopedia, spiritisme.net. Okay. Here you have a picture of Gabriel Delanne around that time. 2nd of March 1901, his father died, Alexandre Delanne. And Gabriel started to give weekly lectures in this French Spiritist Society for the Study of Psychical Phenomenon, as we have founded a couple of years after, and also in a lot of other institutions and cities. So he was really actively disseminating the works and the results of the experiments done in this society. 1902, I lost, I think it's the 5th book, Researches on Mediumship, Recherche sur la médiumnité. And here we can find the first part, the Spiritist Phenomenon and the Automatic Writing of Hysterical. Hysterical was the name given by the psychist for mediums at that time. In the second part, he's examining the subject of animism, and in the third part, the subject of spiritism. So animism is all what comes from the soul of the own medium or own person, and spiritism is what comes from another soul, which is independent of the soul of the medium. Okay, and animism and spiritism is a very well-known subject, developed also by other authors like Alexander Aksakov, for instance, because there is always a mixture of both. Even if it's a third spirit communicating through a medium, the medium will, even without willing, influence the communication in a certain way. Okay. And in the Spiritism is showing multiple evidences of the communication of spirits through automatic writing, evidences, mostly proof of identity, which is totally out of the knowledge of the medium, showing that, how we can make the distinction between what could be animism coming from the medium itself and what is spiritism coming from another spirit. Okay. And this book had the 8th edition in 1923. 1905, Gabriel Delanne adopted a 7-month-old girl, the young Suzanne Rabotin, which was named Suzanne Delanne, and who from that time always lived with him. So this is showing that he was not only in the theory, but also in the practice of the Spiritist teaching. In the same year, 1905, in June, he was participating to the Spiritist Congress in Liège, Belgium. And he gave also a speech. This speech is also available in the Spiritist Encyclopedia. We have also the summary book of this Congress of 1905 in Liège is also fully available. So he was there together with Léon Denis, because Gabriel Delanne and Léon Denis were really very close friends. Same year again, he traveled also to Algiers, visiting the General Noël and his wife, Carmencita, together with Charles Richet. So showing that really Charles Richet was Nobel Prize of Physiology. So Gabriel Delanne was really part of that club of very well-known psychic researchers, not only in France, but in Europe. And so Gabriel Delanne and Charles Richet went to the house of General Noël, which was a Villa Carmen, in order to study the phenomenon who happened there. And the full summary and description, of course, is published in his Revue Scientifique Morale du Spiritisme, that I showed you how you can find them. Okay. In 1906, he was already obliged to walk with two canes, sticks. He went in August and September to Cusset, near Lyon, where he was cared by his friend, Mr. Bouvier. Mr. Bouvier is a well-known spiritist from the city of Lyon. It's another pioneer that we could develop, make some researches about him in the near future. And he had healing, how to say, he was a healer medium. And so he helped and assisted Gabriel Delanne in order to keep his health okay for his mission as long as possible. And from 1908, Gabriel Delanne was also able to spend 5 months each year in the city of Nice, south of France, where friends offered him a very well located villa. From the window of his bedroom, he could admire the sea. And it was there that he worked on his important work, which is the material apparition of the living and the dead. And this work then came, the first volume came out the next year, 1909. It is the first volume about phantoms of the living, of 527 pages, with a huge number of illustrations inside the book. So it's a very thick book. And this book, as per my knowledge, has not yet been translated, not even in Portuguese. Okay. All the books of Gabriel Delanne are translated in Portuguese, but this one apparently has never been translated into Portuguese. 527 pages of small letters. It's quite a challenge. In particular, because there is also the volume 2, which came out in February 1911. And this is treating the phantoms of the dead with 841 pages. Okay, so these two books are really the encyclopedious books done by Gabriel Delanne about materializations of the living and of the dead. And it is really, how to say, the last very big book he wrote about on the spiritist phenomenon. Okay, materialization, which became more and more frequent, and by the way, who continued later on, in particular with Dr. Gustave Gelée in the years 1920 and followings. So this is also showing that Gabriel Delanne was really a pioneer in all these studies and all these things, all these investigations. And he was always talking with all the Colonel de Rocha, with Charles Richet and others, in order to exchange ideas about methodology, about good and wrong results, failures, and so on. And it's very interesting to follow all this, written most of the time by Gabriel Delanne himself in his magazine, La Revue Scientifique et Morale du Spiritisme. So in the conclusion of the tome 2nd, Gabriel Delanne is writing, all precaution being well taken to remove various chances of error, of mistake, we have seen the disembodied human soul manifest itself objectively by photographs, casts, writings, which have made it possible to identify it. These are the same beings that we knew so well on Earth, who make themselves seen long after their disappearance from the terrestrial environment, affirm by their presence that the dissolution of their carnal envelope did not annihilate them. No evidence is superior to this. It suffices to convince forever those who witness it. So it's really entering into these objective proofs, from subjective proofs to objective proofs, the photographs, casts, and writings. And this was really one of the goals to which Gabriel Delanne strongly participated. And in August 1914, so it was World War I, Gabriel Delanne had to cease the publication of his Revue Scientifique Morale and Spiritism because there were no workers anymore for doing paper, for making the typography, for printing. There were disruption everywhere in the supply chain in Paris, so it got impossible to continue publishing the magazine. But fortunately, he could resume in 1917. So there is an interruption of 2.5 years of the magazine. But again, we have all of them from the August 1924 up to January 1917. So seamless, available on the Spiritist Encyclopedia. And at that moment, Gabriel Delanne's state of health had become very bad. He could no longer see. He barely dragged himself, each movement being for him a source of suffering. And so he was a living example of resignation and remained cheerful and very welcoming in spite of all these health problems. And of course, continuing to work, of course, needing more and more assistance from other people, like at the end also Léon Denis also became blind, and he needed assistance from secretaries for dictating the books or having the new books read to him, and then making the word with the prestigious memory that Gabriel Delanne and Léon Denis had even at this advanced age. And it was in 1918 that he made a trip with his family to Aloche in the surrounding of Marseille. This was his last trip out of Paris. He could no longer walk and had to use a wheelchair to carry him from the car to the train. So here we can see some pictures of him when he was older. You can see with a stick, and also it was not the wheelchair, but he was mostly sitting and also blind, as we explained. Also, Delanne knew very well Jean Meyer, which was the mécène of the Spiritist movement in France. So he had a lot of money and he founded a lot of things. For instance, the International Metapsychic Institute, Institut Métapsychique International, that was founded in Paris in 1919 by Jean Meyer, giving her a building for making their activities. And Gabriel Delanne advised Jean Meyer to select the Dr. Gustave Gelet as director for this institute. And why? Because Dr. Gustave Gelet was a well-known scientist, but he was also convinced about the spiritualist paradigm. Okay, so he was really the ideal person for making these studies, and there is really where these experiments of materialization, of casting, and so on have been developed. And still today we have the gypsum casts of these phenomena conserved, because the Institut Métapsychique International still exists in Paris. The address has changed, it's Rue de l'Aqueduc, but the founded in 1919, so it's more than over 100 years now existing in Paris. And also, Jean Meyer helped to found again the Union Spirit Française after its dissolution in around 1890. It was founded in 1919. Okay, and this Union Spirit Française is still existing today. It has been renamed by André Dumas, removing the word spiritist or spirit. USFIPES, don't ask me exactly what it is because it's a little bit complicated. Union pour la recherche de l'étude de la survivance, and so on. And more recently, it has been renamed again by the direction of this institution. It's called Union Spirit de France. Okay, so another institution which is 100 years old in our country. Almost blind, then Gabriel Delanne even so continued working in his review and other books. He wrote the introduction of Ceux qui nous quittent, which is a book of Madame de Watteville, published in 1917. He wrote the preface of La Réalité Spirit, Spiritist Reality, by Henri Regnault in 1921. The preface of La Villa du Silence, the silent, how do we translate that into English? A Mansão do Silêncio. I
think so. Yeah.
The Mansion of Silence, by Paul Baudier, which was published in 1921. And also Écoutons nos morts, and here I have put the translation, Let's Listen to Our Dead, in collaboration with Mr. Bournickel, published in 1923. So you see that he never stopped, Delanne never stopped his activities. Okay. And the last book which has been published is Documents to Serve to the Study of the Reincarnation. It was published in 1924. You see in 1898, and basically myself, I read Kardec when I started with Spiritism, and of course, I was convinced about a lot of things, but my biggest resistance was exactly about the reincarnation. And it's only when I read this book of Gabriel Delanne that, okay, now give up. It's really, there are so many evidences that we cannot deny it. This book is the one that convinced me about reincarnation. So it is very, very, very well done and written. So here you can see the content, historical review. So it's also not from today or yesterday. Scientific basis, properties of the perispirit. Again, touching the question of the soul of animals, intelligence of animals, supranormal faculties of animals. You have some animals which can perceive spirits. Is the integral memory, memory renovation experience, heredity and prodigious children, studies on reminiscences, remembrance of past lives, reincarnations announced in advance, overview of evidences in favor of reincarnation. So it's really a very, very good book about this subject of reincarnation that Gabriel Delanne published, and so he could not write it himself. So he had a friend, Mr. Durand, who stayed the necessary time with him, and Gabriel Delanne was then dictating the book to his friend for having it published. Quote from this book: all these phenomena, apparently so different from each other, have a common explanation. It is that of reincarnation, which shows us the spirit slowly climbing the arduous road which must lead it to happiness, the price of its incessant efforts. So is the conclusion of this book written by Gabriel Delanne. So you can have a lot of other different explanations for this, for that, for another phenomenon. But at the end, the only explanation which fits to all the phenomenon is the reincarnation. Okay. 1925, the 12th of October, was the death of Gabriel Delanne's cousine, Mrs. Mathilde Pellet, that lived with him for more than 30 years, devoted companion, and cared for him with devotion. So for the tasks in his house. And a little bit later, 15th of February 1926, it was the turn of Gabriel Delanne to return to the spiritual home. And his grave is near that of Allan Kardec in the Père Lachaise cemetery, just something like 100 meters, not even distant from it, very close to it. And you have here on the right side a picture of the grave of the Delanne family. Now, quickly, before I finished, Gabriel Delanne out of France. So I checked with Brazilian Spiritist Federation. So they have 5 titles translated and published. You can see with 34,000, 29,000, 40,000 even for the reincarnation. So they made a lot of the first one in the beginning of the 20th century, the other ones only in the mids of the century. Yet, so it's summarizing something like 150,000 prints. Unfortunately, the only one which is still today in the catalog of Brazilian Federation is found here and there. Okay. There are also several other translations which can be downloaded for free on this website I put here. So it's autoresespiritasclassicos.com. So if you look for Gabriel Delanne in Portuguese, you will easily find them. And they have really all the translation except the one of these big 2 volumes of the materialized apparitions of the living and the dead, which have not yet been translated to my knowledge, in any other language as French. In Spain also, I found the Soul is Immortal and the Reincarnation, the Successive Lives. I found also Spiritism in Front of Science, an old edition from 1886, and the Animic Evolution of 1899. And in English, I could only find 2. Evidence for Future Life, which is a translation of The Soul is Immortal, which is dated 1904, that you can find on Google Books, and that you can see and buy today in the United States Spiritist Federation. You have the Gabriel Delanne book on reincarnation. Okay. I did not yet find any other. If some of you have a knowledge of any other translation, please let me know. Gabriel Delanne supporting the Spiritist movement. We have a lot of Gabriel Delanne Spiritist group, several in France, and Gabriel Delanne appears from time to time to give some communications and assistance, in particular in the scientific research. He came recently because there is some project which is now being developed slowly but surely in this area, and he seems to be one of the spirits which will take an active part into it. But there is also another episode which is quite interesting. It's from Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira. They made a travel in Europe in 1965 and wrote this book, Entre Irmãos de Outras Terras, where in section 31, you have 20 questions and answers with Gabriel Delanne. And you see the questions and the answer given by Gabriel Delanne on all these questions. Okay. Concluding now, because I overshoot a little bit the time, I'm sorry for that. Allan Kardec did not only come to bring a religion. No, Allan Kardec did not come to bring a religion. He imposed no cult. His morality is that of Jesus, freed from all false interpretation. But what he has endowed mankind is with a doctrine or body of knowledge capable of answering all the objections of unbelief and all the great problems posed by reason. Indeed, so far, we have considered only the moral side of his doctrine, but its closer study shows us that by following his teaching, we can arrive at the most beautiful scientific discoveries. If there is a still unexplored field of study, it is that which understands the relationship between the invisible world and ours. How many problems to solve before being able to give a scientific theory of these relations? But a day will come when they will be known as scientifically studied phenomena and will no longer be a secret to us. Again, a speech he gave in 1880 in the Père Lachaise ceremony. It was the anniversary of Kardec's death at that moment. So it's very important, this statement, because it shows that Gabriel Delanne understood very young this problem of religion, which is also a little bit controversial in Brazil, but not so much in Europe, except for the Brazilians which are living here. And also showing how, because all this knowledge we get from the Spiritist phenomenon, they could help so much in making the science progress that it is really a pity that the mainstream science today still follows a materialistic paradigm, closing the eyes to this spiritual world which is surrounding us and which is somehow the future of the science. Okay, and this was really the leitmotif that guided Gabriel Delanne during his whole mission. Who amongst us has not asked to himself, while the whirlwind of the existence gave him a moment of rest, why are we on the earth, and what will be our future? What will our future be? The feeling that drives us to this search is determined by reason, which imperiously wants to know the why and the how of the events taking place around us. The time has passed when we could a priori reject our ideas without doing them the honor of discussing them. Today, Spiritism imposes itself on public attention. The absurd prejudices which greeted him at the birth must disappear in the face of reality. It is necessary that one knows that, far from being visionaries, hollow brains, the spiritists or spiritualists, in English, are cold and methodical observers, reporting only well-established facts. This is coming from the Spiritism in front of science. And with this, I will end my presentation for today. So it was a little bit on short notice. I would have liked to put more content into it, but okay, there will be next opportunities. And so far, I thank you a lot for your attention and for your time.
Thank you so much, Charles. It's been so enlightening, so nice indeed, especially because it's the first one and gives this overview about the work of Delanne. And it's really interesting to see that when we start to study Kardec, we think that Kardec is the only one he's working on his own, and he's the one that is actually facing not just religion, but also materialism. And then we hear about Leon Denis, Gabriel Delanne, and many others, and we think that their work is peripheral, has nothing to do directly with Spiritism. And watching your presentation, we'll see that Gabriel Delanne, he was born within Spiritism, and he worked for Spiritism actually. So his contribution wasn't something that was outside, but within the development of Spiritism. And it's really interesting to see, because now we not just get interested in his work, but we see also, what was going on. It's like, to me, it's like a play where we have the actors, but we don't see the scenario around. We don't see things. So what's the context of Kardec and this work, and why he said that, and why he was talking about this? And then when we start to be placed, as if we were going back to their time, we start to understand things. And it's really interesting to see that they are more concerned with materialism than with, established religion per se, because they see that, materialism is actually the antagonism of what Spiritism, wants to bring to the world. We had two questions here. And I think you've answered the questions on the course of your talk. One was by Ebony Paris. She asked if he had children, and then you said he had Suzanne, this
Yes.
girl. Yeah. And do you know if he had any other child apart from
No,
her?
he was not married.
Okay, right. And the other question was from Sandra Jimenez about books in English, and you've also answered that as well.
Yes, yes. So
he had those two.
This is what I find a pity, you see, because Gabriel Delanne is not so well known. Of course, in Brazil there are 5 good translations done by Carlos Imbasaí and some very strong translators, but it's only 5. I mean, the 2 main ones have never been translated, and it's really an encyclopedic work that Gabriel Delanne has made at that time. Because today we have a more recent, more author that has published through the French-speaking Spiritist movement, the saga of the ectoplasm, and it's very interesting as well, because of course he took a lot of sources into these 2 volumes of Gabriel Delanne, Les apparitions matérialisées, but he also continues the story until today. And interestingly, what you can see is more of the researchers of that time were like fraud hunters than true researchers. And Gabriel Delanne, of course, he had the cold eye. He was really very cautious not to be cheated and so on. But he was not fraud hunters, and he was, conscient of the conditions that must be gathered in order to have the phenomenon to happen. So he could observe much more things than all these fraud hunters, which basically were more interested in raising flags than really making the science progress. And Gabriel Delanne never fell into this trap as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's very nice. So before we end our wonderful presentation of today, I just want to thank Elsa Rossi and Marcos Pimenta, Sandra Jimenez, let me see, Faye Waddington, and who else we have here? Solomon, Paris, Esteban, Ebony Paris.
So should you have any question, even if it comes later on, don't hesitate to ask. I will be happy to answer you. And you can transmit me the questions, and it will be a pleasure for me to answer.
Yeah,
there was another
TM here.
Sorry?
We have TM here. I don't know who she is, but she said very well researched.
Merci. Thanks to you. All the best as well. I think Gabriel Delanne is very sympathetic person. He was one of the 3, I would say, pillars that sustained the Spiritist movement in France after the death of Kardec. Léon Denis, Gabriel Delanne, and Camille Flammarion. Of course, there were others, and after them, Jean Meyer, amongst that. I talked also a little bit about who make some continuation with also some others like Hubert Forestier. But Gabriel Delanne is really one of the main apostles, which were, follower of Allan Kardec, and developing a lot. And maybe one thing I could say, you see, Kardec wrote, Spiritism is not casting concrete. If someone finds something which wrong into the Spiritist teachings and demonstrates it, Spiritist teaching will change. And Gabriel Delanne did one of such evolution. It's the only one I know, but it's on a detail, of course. It's when Kardec is saying that by psychography, the medium is, the spirit is acting on the hand, the brace of the medium. And Gabriel Delanne, the studies of the brain and the neurons was really more developed at his time. He says, I think that rather of acting on the hand, the spirit is acting on the motor center in the brain, making the hand to move. So it's one example, you see, where Delanne adjusted a little bit some teaching of Kardec. But of course, then all the rest, existence of soul, immortality of soul, that the conscience stays, communicability, and so on. All these main points, reincarnation, of course, are unchanged and even strongly reinforced by Gabriel Delanne. And I'm really happy also. Gabriel Delanne was a pioneer, for instance. When you take more modern book about reincarnation, like the studies done by Ian Stevenson, you can see that Gabriel Delanne did the same in his book on reincarnation. he was really a pioneer introducing this type of studies. And I have also another book of Carl Eugene Müller, which was a Swiss guy, which wrote also a book about reincarnation in English, by the way, in 1960, in the year 1960s. Also basing his works and his studies on these bases that were established by Gabriel Delanne.
Yeah, very good. TM is Tanya. Thanks, Tanya.
Okay.
And thanks all the others. Before we go, I just want to say that we are going to have all these guest speakers talking about, different books that Charles mentioned today, the works of Gabriel Delanne in more detail. So our next one is going to be on the 5th of February. So the first Sunday in February, which is the 5th of February, 6 p.m. UK time. So we will have Alexandre Caldini talking about reincarnation. So
let me quickly check. I'm not sure first February Sunday. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, and then from today on, every first Sunday of the month, we have someone
the first
talking.
Sunday of February is the 5th.
The 5th, isn't it?
Not the 1st.
Yeah.
Because if the first day of January
the first
is a
Sunday,
the first day of February.
It's first February Sunday.
So it's first Sunday, so it's the 5th of February.
Okay? The 5th of February, yes. But we'll make the announcement in due time.
Okay.
So, Charles, I have no words to thank you because it's been brilliant again. The work that you do, bringing history and knowledge about the work of these pioneers is so valuable, so important. It expands our horizon when we look at what Kardec did and also the Spiritism. So thank you so much. And before we go, I just want to give the credits for the conception of this series of talks about Gabriel Delanne to Elsa Hossi. She was the one that woke up one day and said, we have to talk about, the pioneers of Spiritism. Let's organize a series this time, because we did one about the work of Léon Denis. This time is going to be about Delanne. So here we are, thanks to Elsa. So
yes, thank you,
so
Elsa. Even if it was very short notice, only I think 3 days ago. I think
3 days ago,
to do something. It's still with a lot of imperfection, but I think the essential was here.
Yes. Okay, then. So see you all in a month's time.
All the best for the new year again, and may the peace of our Master Jesus stay with all of us.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.